Hello, everybody, and welcome back in to another episode of Speaking Eagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Bate. As always, he is Ricardo Martinez-Paz. We've got another episode coming at you guys. Preseason, we're 2 weeks in now. Training camp over. I mean, Ricardo, we're getting down to the end of this thing here. We're gonna have real meaningful NFL games here soon, and we've got position groups to talk about today. We're going to break down these preseason games and just talk Steelers and Eagles. But, dude, how are you doing, bro?
I'm doing well, man. I mean, 3 days removed from vacation, coming back from the Dominican Republic and catching up on all the sports stuff. So all the NFL stuff. I'm like, man, it's really starting to hit me. I was like, we're getting really close to the start of the season.
We're getting really close. Yeah. Well, first off, I'm glad that you had a good vacation down there in the DR, and yeah, you're caught up now on the sports scene, bro. But I mean, we are one more preseason game, then you're gonna have the college football games coming back, and then we are gonna be right back in the thick of things here. It's not gonna be long before we have that first Thursday night game and the NFL season just gets back.
Oh yeah, can't wait for that.
Yeah. You know it's coming back. And yeah, I mean, let's dive right into it because both of these teams are really getting down to crunch time here, wrapping up training camp, really getting kind of the final touches on seeing some of these guys who are going to be trying to fight for roster spots or win position battles. It's all coming to a head here in these final weeks of the preseason. So. Let's start things off by talking about these first 2 weeks of preseason that we've seen so far, and I guess let's start off with the Eagles, and just if there's any glaring takeaways that you have from their preseason games so far, anything that you've kind of taken away from them and whatnot, and just anywhere you want to go with that.
Yeah, so I mean, the results, I'll just say this to start. Results like win, loss, tie, whatever it is, that doesn't really matter to me. I'm sure it doesn't for a lot of coaches, but Eagles have not won either of those other two preseason games. First against the Ravens, they lost that one after failing a 2-point conversion. The second one, they tied against the Browns, which is funny. But my biggest takeaway from those two games would have to be Marcus Mariota's play. Obviously, very experienced guy, but he's just looked it's kind of, from what I've been reading at least, and just from like watching him in two games, he's just, I don't know, he's lacking in confidence. I don't know if that's it or his mechanics aren't like fully there, but it's just he's been sailing passes left and right, overthrowing just about everyone. And I feel like the gap between the backup quarterback position and the third spot is narrowed. And I think Tanner McKee, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later, has really closed that gap. He's actually been fairly good in these preseason games, even if the stats don't necessarily show it. He's been a bit more confident than Mariota has been. He's also shown more zip, more poise in the pocket. So it's really interesting to see, such an important position as if for any team, the backup quarterback spot. In case your starting quarterback goes down, you need to have the next man up, someone who can lead the offense. And currently, I mean, based off 2 games and off training camp, it seems like it's Tanner McKee who's going to take that. But I don't think Sirianni's anywhere near close to deciding that.
Yeah, I mean, it's concerning because, this is a team that, really has their sights set on a Super Bowl and, making a deep run in the playoffs. And with the way that Marcus Mariota's played as your backup, I mean, God forbid Jalen Hurts were to, suffer a serious injury for an extended period of time. But even if he just gets banged up or bruised for a couple weeks like he did last year, and you got to have the backup come in there and step up and try to win football games. Like, I don't know. You tell me, how much confidence do you have in, those two guys to potentially win you football games as the leader of the huddle, should Jalen Hurts, have to miss any time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much confidence. But for expectations wise, for Tanner McKee, I feel like he's exceeded them considering he's a 6th-round pick. The joke for the Eagles is we're a QB factory, whatever. But
yeah,
Mariota, I mean, he's just been, I don't know, he's just been lacking in I mean, he had a really sloppy interception in the game against the Browns. It's just very overthrown on the receiver. But right now, I'm not feeling very confident. But that battle for the backup spot is probably closer than people might think. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It's kind of alarming how
it is
poorly
a bit
Mariota.
alarming.
Yeah, so I don't. I mean, there's still another preseason game. I'm not gonna like panic yet, but it's still like you said. If Hurts were to go down with something at some point during the season, it's not. I'm not sure I'd be
It's
that
not an
confident
issue until it suddenly becomes an issue.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we'll get to that if it ever comes. Hopefully, it doesn't. Knock on wood, obviously, but it's not looking good in that spot at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess my other takeaway really has been linebacker play. I mean, and I just the players we've lost over the last two games, injuries, retirement, Miles Jack, which was really interesting. Yeah, that came out this morning, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you sent it to me this morning. That was how I first found out, was that you sent me, like the update about it all going down.
I was like, man, he was kind of playing deeper into the last preseason game, but still, I feel like, with his experience, he might have had a shot to make the roster. There's someone else who went, Sean Bradley, who was more special teams. Also, when he suffered a torn Achilles in the first preseason game. So an already thin position is looking even thinner now. And that's really alarming. Zach Cunningham has also kind of been playing deeper into the third, fourth quarter of preseason. I'm not sure that's a good thing either, but Nakobe Dean, I mean, Nicholas Moreau, I mean, it's just not looking all that promising. Nakobe Dean actually showed some flashes in this past game. He had a forced fumble inside the red zone. I think he was inside the 5. And I mean, apart from him, I don't think anyone else has really stood out in a good way. So again, just lacking in talent there in that linebacking room. But again, comes down to really how the Eagles value the position, which is not very much. So
I mean, it feels like a lot's getting put on Nakobe Dean at this point, because even though they brought in Miles Jack and Cunningham, it still feels like it's like that position group. And we're going to get to this in a second here when we go through the rest of the position groups that we have to break down, but it feels like it's all on his shoulders, the success that position group is going to have this season.
Yeah, it's not looking great on that front either. And I'm not really sure what the Eagles are going to do, and I'm not sure who they're going to keep, who they're going to cut. That's just because no one has really stood out in that positive of light. So those are definitely my two biggest takeaways from them. Like I said, don't really care about the outcome of the game. It's just the performances.
Yeah, for sure.
Have been.
For sure. The outcome isn't really what it's all about. And I guess we can move over to the Steelers now, because I also think I kind of have two major takeaways. My first one, we'll talk about the wide receivers in a bit, but George Pickens, I mean, it's hard to not get excited about him as a Steelers fan and what he's done. I mean, you could say he was the biggest winner of training camp. I mean, the flashes that he's shown in these two preseason games as well, scoring a touchdown in each of them. I mean, you've seen the clips over and over of him just absolutely putting the Buccaneers defensive back in a spin cycle, breaking his ankle on that. And he's talked about how he wants to get better at the run after the catch. And I mean, he showed that in that first game of the preseason against the Buccaneers. So he's really stood out. And another player that, kind of stood out to me as well is Jaylen Warren. He looked really good in this second preseason game. He was the highest rated player in the game, according to PFF. And he, broke off that huge run that he took to the house, which was, pretty awesome. But even just in the blocking game, he's just really, I feel like his game is kind of getting to be really well-rounded overall. And I'm really excited to see what he can do in year two. I've got some hot takes that are starting to stir about him. I'm not ready to put one together yet.
Okay.
In the next couple weeks, we'll see. I may say something kind of wild about Jaylen Warren, because I'm getting really excited about what I've seen from him into the second year. And I think he's going to have a big second year. And I'll talk a little bit more about him once we get into the position group breakdown. So that's kind of my first thing is we're seeing some of these players in their second year really shine so far in the preseason.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you a question relating to Jaylen Warren. I don't know if it'll come out now then if I ask it. But I've been reading stuff where Jalen Warren's been showing a bit more burst than Najee Harris has been. I don't know if there's any potential of him overtaking Najee Harris. I don't think that'll happen necessarily, but from stuff I've been reading, that I don't know. I want to hear.
I also feel like the Steelers have been babying Najee Harris a lot this camp, and I think it's they're not really. I have to even look if he's played any snaps in either of these games, but because I didn't watch the last game too closely. In week 1, I don't remember if he got in there or not, but I feel like they've been babying him a lot, definitely in training camp, because if you remember back to last season, he suffered that foot injury early in training camp, and that hindered him really through it felt like through the first entire half of the year last year. And he really, so I mean, I like to think back on the positive about, kind of how he closed out last year with that offensive line really shining. And I think that once we get into the flow of the season, we could see him bounce back. But, I'm really excited about Jalen Warren too. I think they're going to be a nice 1-2 punch. And yeah, they could have some real success this year. We'll talk more about them when we get into the running back position group.
Yeah,
but, my other one is just like, this team kind of transitioned us into stock up, stock down too, is that this Steelers team is just looking really good in their first 2 games of preseason. And I know it's only preseason, but like you could go up and down. Like there's nobody that I can really call out and say like, man, this is something that's really concerning me. Like everything that I felt like could have gone right has gone right so far in these preseason games. Like Kenny Pickett in the first team offense have scored on both of their 2 possessions. Like Joey Porter Jr., the young corner, really looks like he could end up being a stud, at the outside cornerback position. Like, the new additions of like a guy like Cole Holcomb looks really good in the inside linebacker group. Like there's nothing that I'm concerned about where it's like, oh man, this may not pay dividends. So like, I guess I'm just really happy that the team is just playing so well. I mean, you were expecting, Broderick Jones to potentially have to start. I mean, Dan Moore has looked really good trying to hold him off for the left tackle spot. And from everything I've read, it sounds like he may get the nod to start week 1. We still have obviously the 3rd week of preseason to see how they play. But I guess that's my other takeaway is the team has just looked like they're ready to go. Like they're ready for week 1. And I like that the Steelers are known for having a tough training camp, kind of the opposite of the Eagles. And, they've been playing some of their starters in these preseason games. I think they're going to really come out and be ready to go come week 1. And they're looking like they're really starting to, already grow into an identity and, have a bit of a personality and a moxie about this team before the season even kicks off, which I'm really stoked about.
Yeah, I was going to say they look motivated. They look fired up and ready to go for the first week of the season to already start. Like that, no, that's a really good sign. I don't know if the vibe was like the same last year. I don't remember if you felt that this sort of similar
I definitely didn't. And I think a lot of it was because the only talk last year was Kenny Pickett, like Mitch Trubisky starting the season. When are we going to see Kenny Pickett? When are we going to see Kenny Pickett? And like that was just the common talks, and nobody really had expectations. I don't want to say people really had playoff expectations with this team last year. This year, with Kenny Pickett in his second year, like I think everybody's really excited to see, Kenny progress off of, what he did to close out the season last year. Can this offense kind of find that next gear? And is this team capable of really pushing for a playoff spot in his second year? And really what's, you could make the case arguably the best division in football in the NFC North.
Yeah, and from the stuff I've been reading recently about Kenny Pickett, this dude's just on fire right now. He's just had really good training camp. Yeah, like in preseason, very sharp, as you said. So I mean, that's definitely very positive. Very
dude, and you hear like there's certain national broadcasts I'll listen to of different national shows. Colin Cowherd, he does a lot of NFL stuff right now, so that always comes to mind with me. But like, it seems like such a casual take when people are kind of like writing off the Steelers and Kenny Pickett. Like this is a team that I think can really do some damage in his second year. And I think when you follow it closer, like you and I do, like you can see, and like Kenny Pickett's really like, there's possibility that he's going to take a jump here in the second year.
Yeah, and also let's not forget Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, so you can never write the Steelers off. I don't care what anyone says. You just can't write them off. So
and let's transition this right into stock up, stock down. And I guess that's where I'll kind of start is I don't really have a guy or two guys that I want to say their stock is down. I mean, I'm going to kind of throw Mason Rudolph under the bus a little bit just because he's had a bit of a lackluster training camp. I mean, he hasn't looked bad in his two preseason games so far. He hasn't thrown any interceptions, which is nice, but he has thrown a lot of picks in camp. Really hasn't done anything super inspiring, but I mean, he's going to be the third string quarterback. There's not much concern there. So if his stock is down, like that's the guy that I have to pick on for his stock being down, I'll take that.
Yeah, no, that's totally valid. I mean, yeah, that I'm curious as to who your other player is, or I don't know if you have any other players.
I really, Ricardo, I don't really have a guy I mean, I'm curious if you had someone in mind that you were expecting me to say, but I also don't have anyone that I want to pick on here.
Yeah, I was thinking like Kendrick Green specifically because I was reading on I was reading on Behind the Steel Curtain, the Steelers BGN, and and I saw that he's just been having a tough preseason. Like he was getting bullied, he was getting pushed a lot in the first 2 preseason games. And I think there was one line specifically that said he should just be cut. So
I mean, he should be cut. I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. I think at this point, the backup center is either going to be Nate Herbig, who they've given a lot of reps there, especially in training camp, or it's going to be someone who's not currently on the roster right now. Because I mean, Kendrick Green just isn't a viable option at the center position. I mean, he even said last year he's not comfortable playing center, and the Steelers still decided to put him back there this year because they have depth at guard. Like he's not needed at guard. So his only shot was really to solidify himself as the backup center. And I just don't think it's going to happen. So I guess that's another one that I could say his stock is definitely down because I don't think he has a roster spot on this team.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you. But there's also one other player. It's not really that big of a stock down for me. And it's probably shouldn't be at this point, but because it's kind of early, but Broderick Jones, just because he's so raw still. I don't think it's a stock down necessarily. It's more just him struggling with pass protection in the 2 preseason games. It's just obviously his strength is more run blocking. Pass protection's one thing that he really needs to work on. But as you said, Dan Moore Jr. is looking like he's going to get that starting left tackle position. But I don't know. I just wanted to point that out and see if you had any
I mean, look, I said this when they drafted him, like, don't expect it to come along right away. Like, this is a guy that's going to need some time. And that's why I think, like, even, I think Dan Moore is going to get the nod to start the season at left tackle. I still expect Broderick Jones in there within the first 6 weeks of the season, just because it's like, I think it was Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach, that even said, you don't draft a guy that high to sit him. So, like, they're going to get him into games and he's going to develop by playing. And I think down the road, we're going to see a really talented. I think you see spurts here and there of like, holy cow, like the talent's there. The Steelers just have to hone it and get him to like, put it in and snap out. But I don't want to pick on him and say his stock is down because this is kind of where I expected him to be at this point of training camp. And I expected it to be like, hey, you see the flashes of it there. Dan Moore, he's going into his 3rd year in the league now. You can roll with that as the starting left tackle, or you could just give it to the rookie right away. So it's really a toss up for me either way. But this is where I expected Broderick Jones to be at this point of his development. So I'm okay with everything we've seen from him so far.
Yeah, that's totally valid. Just wanted to get your input on that. But
yeah. So as for stock up, I mean, my big one was really, Jaylen Warren, who I've talked about a lot, and I'm not going to dive into it too much again, but he's definitely got stock up for me. And then the second one that I got to give stock up to, and we talked about this last week, man, it's Joey Porter Jr. He's got me really excited. You asked me, like, am I getting excited about the potential of having a young stud cornerback, all of a sudden, be here in Pittsburgh? I really liked what he said the other day too. I don't remember if it was after the game or when exactly he said it, but he was like, I'm in this. He's like, I want to be one of the best corners of my generation. I want to be one of the best corners of all time. Like, that's what he's striving for. He said, like, I don't need the money. My dad played football, made the millions of dollars. I was comfortable growing up. He's playing this because he wants to be, a guy that gets remembered in this league. He's playing it because he loves the sport, which is something that really kind of juices me up, that it's not a guy that's, in this for the money necessarily. He's more in this because, he wants to be great. He wants to be remembered that way. And I think that, the chip that went on his shoulder from not getting selected in the first round is so huge for that. Because I can see a guy who maybe gets drafted in the first round in that scenario where if he says something similar to that, I could take it the wrong way and be like, man, that makes me sound a little bit, wary. Like, oh, he just wants to be great. Like, is he going to be really determined? But I think he still has that chip on his shoulder, and he's looked good in training camp. And he, had his first career interception in the preseason game. Granted, it was an awful throw, easy interception, but he looked good, and man, I'm excited about the potential of him. Being a corner on this roster for years to come. Again, I don't want to get too crazy over the preseason, but he's looked very good. His stock is up for me.
Hey, that's still better than, standing out in a good way like that. That's always a positive. That chip on his shoulder is definitely huge. I'm definitely with you there, and I love that. I love those kind of players. Just like they're in it for the game, not the money. Just like strictly kind of business sort of thing. It's just like
I hope he keeps that mindset if he's due for a contract in 4 years here. He's gonna need an extension. I hope he keeps that mindset. Yeah.
We'll get to that later.
All about the game and not about the money, but
only time will tell. Now. That's always great. But
let's get into the Eagles now. Stock up, stock down. I'll let you decide which one you want to start with.
Yeah. Also, hold on. I actually forgot to mention someone for stock up. I'm surprised you didn't say Nick Herbig, because
what? He's another guy I could have given it to. He's looked really good in training camp. Been really aggressive getting to the passer. The question was always, does he have the size to really stand the point of attack in the run game? I don't know if we've necessarily seen that yet, but the flashes you've seen of him as an edge rusher, man, his ceiling is promising because he's a little bit undersized and he's got those speed moves to get to the quarterback. So you could definitely put him in that category as well.
I would just say he's had, I think, 2.5 sacks in 2 games. So it's looking pretty good.
Yeah. There's a lot of guys that you could put in the stock up, dude. I can talk about Kenny Pickett, man. I can talk about Cole Holcomb looking good, the inside linebacker signing. The rest of this offensive line. James Daniels is having even a better, he's having a really solid preseason. So there's a lot of guys that I'm high on, but Nick Herbig is definitely up there as well.
Let's go. I'm like kind of cheering for, I don't know, just there's something about him for some reason. I'm just like, I want him to do really well. I couldn't tell you what it is, but
heck yeah, man.
Moving over to the Eagles. So I guess we'll start with, I feel like I don't have a sort of contrary to you, the opposite of you. It's like I don't really have many players with stock up, more so stock down, which is weird, but that's just kind of the nature.
Not what you want to feel right now.
That's not really a good sign. But in any case, I'll start with stock down. So I already talked about one of them, Marcus Mariota, which I feel like I don't really have to say much more. Just he's been very disappointing. It's at this point, I feel like he's just useful for running, which is I don't know if this man can complete a pass beyond like 10 yards because he overthrows all of them. Like it's just been terrible. And I don't know if I'm being too harsh on it. Maybe I'm not, but it's just how I've been seeing it. And it's kind of been the theme throughout the training camp and it's carried over into these preseason games. So again, not a good sign for the backup position, but
I don't think you're being too hard on him, man. And I mean, I don't know if you ever got around to watching the quarterback documentary on Netflix, but just from what I saw on there, man, he just struck me as the guy that's not as like he lacks certain things in his game, whether it's, deficiencies in arm talent or what have you, that like, I just feel like he doesn't necessarily put in the same amount of work as far as like being a student of the game to make up for. And I just think there's something lacking there as far as leadership and commanding a huddle, commanding a locker room that, when you have those issues and then also you can't make the throws down the field, I mean, it leads to a rocky scenario for a guy to be your backup quarterback. And he really hasn't looked good in these first 2 preseason games. So I agree with you on a stock down. Being tagged with that right now.
Yeah, and I think at this point, I would definitely take Gardner Minshew over Mariota, which is, I don't know if that's a bad thing or not. It might be.
I mean, I remember sitting here in our free agency episode being like, wow, this is great. Marcus Mariota is going to be an upgrade over Gardner Minshew, but I certainly don't think that's the case.
No, it hasn't been. It's just you would have thought it would have been kind of smoother because it's sort of similar to Jalen Hurts in that he can run compared to Gardner Minshew. Obviously can't really do that, more of a pure pocket passer, but it's just not how it's turned out. He's got some time he's got preseason to figure it out. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how that QB2 battle plays out. But my other stock down, Josh Sills, he's been just not good either. I mean, if the only other player I would have really highlighted in this would have been Grady Williams, but he's already gone.
And you said he was going to be one of the first players that gets cut.
Exactly. And then what happened? He got cut. So he was just that bad.
There he goes.
Yeah, Josh Sills isn't really doing himself any favors. I think he's given up at least 2 sacks in the 2 games, but not really doing himself any favors to at least compete for a backup spot. And the reason I'm mentioning him is because obviously the starters haven't really played, and some other players haven't really changed their stock, if that makes sense. But this one was probably the most notable stock down, apart from Mariota. So
which is very valid. And I mean, hey, I guess that could be a good thing that if a lot of, and that's just how Nick Sirianni runs it. He doesn't have his starters in there a lot in preseason. So I guess that could be something that you look at when you say, there aren't a lot of guys that are necessarily stock up right now. Well, you can lean it on the fact that like the guys that should have their stock up right now just aren't playing in the preseason. So like you could still feel optimistic about that. And why don't you tell us who you do have for stock up?
So the other one is kind of in conjunction with the quarterback position. I already said it. Tanner McKee's also he's been showing potential for a 6th round draft pick. He's probably exceeding expectations right now. And I mean, like I already said before, he's been looking sharper than Mariota. Seems like he has more of a grasp on the offense. And I don't know if that's because he went to Stanford. Maybe he's just like smart and just like really that clicks for him. I don't know, but I don't know if there's a correlation there. But it seems like he's been doing better in this offense than Mariota has been, and which is weird because of when you think about how long Mariota's been in the league, and Tanner McKee's only a rookie, so that kind of shows you. I guess in this sense, it's kind of encouraging to see that he's exceeding expectations, but in the other light, it's like Mariota's not doing well. So,
do you think there's any scenario where they like think Tanner McKee is all they need at the backup position, and maybe they go out and bring in some other guy to their practice squad or something as the 3rd string and cut Mariota to save some money? Or do you think it's worth it to just keep him on the roster even if McKee does beat him out for the backup spot?
Oh man, that I honestly hope that doesn't happen. Like that, I don't know. I think this season at least we would have Tanner McKee as QB3. And Ian Book, forget about him. He's probably gone. But Mario, I feel like we have to keep him. I don't know if that's like salary. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it was a 1-year deal. So I don't know how much was guaranteed necessarily, but I feel like still having a veteran in that QB room, it's still helpful, even if he's not necessarily performing all that well. And I mean, it's a 6th round pick. It's Tanner McKee. I don't think he's ready for that yet. If you ask me this next year, then I'd probably say maybe stick with Tanner McKee. But right now, I would probably keep Mariota, or if you do cut and bring in another veteran. But I just
I'm just looking right now, and he had $5 million guaranteed at signing, and his cap hit is only about $2 million the way it's spread out and how they pay him. So it really doesn't make sense to cut him. And then especially on top of the fact you consider like what the 49ers went through last year in the playoffs, even if McKee does beat him out for the backup spot, just to have that veteran presence, God forbid you get down to like your 3rd string quarterback, that you're rolling with that versus, what the 49ers had to go through, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And then my other player, I'd say Sidney Brown. In the first game, he had 9 tackles. Dude looked fantastic in that game, was just flying all over the field. In this game, I believe he had 4 tackles, so not quite as active. But in the first game, he looked like he could potentially be playing more than I might expect, or some people might expect, because he just looked that good in that first game against the Ravens. And that's encouraging to see too. 3rd round pick. So I mean, to see him at least, showing positive flashes, some good flashes in preseason games, it's always a good sign. It's sort of, I don't know. I don't think he's going to start right away. I feel like I've been saying that, but even if he doesn't, that's totally fine. There's no need to like force it or anything, because you have Terrell Edmonds and a couple other guys in there who've been in the league for a little longer. So right now, I mean, we're going to go over that too anyway in the positions. Or actually, we did last week.
We did that last week.
Yeah.
Well, I'll add one thing on Sydney Brown is I don't know if you caught this in the last broadcast, but whoever was doing the color commentary as the analyst, I don't think it was the play-by-play guy, but the analyst said that in his they interviewed Sydney Brown prior to the game, leading up to the game or whatever. And they asked him do you like what's your thoughts? Have you ever played special teams? Like, would you play special teams? Do you like doing that? And his response was, I bleep and love special teams. So that tells you everything you need to know about the way that this dude goes about playing the game.
Yeah, I didn't see that. No, that's actually, that makes so much, because it's just tackling on special team. That's literally all it is. So, I mean,
that when I heard that quote, that juiced me up. I was like, holy cow, this dude just loves going and trying to take people's heads off.
Literally, that's his strength. That's what he loves doing. So that's a great football player. Hopefully he does start at some point down the line. But that's pretty. That does fire me up a bit.
I'll say, we'll talk about this guy more when we get into the position groups. But kind of similar to how you asked me about Nick Herbig, I'm going to ask you about Nolan Smith. I thought he looked pretty good in that second preseason game, man. And I think he's definitely got a knack for getting into backfields, and I think he's going to be disruptive. Again, it's kind of the same thing as Herbig, where with his size, I don't know, I don't see him as an every down outside. I mean, certainly not right now with how stacked the Eagles' outside linebackers and edge rushers are. But that's a dude who just has such a high motor and is going to get to the quarterback a decent amount of times this season. And he played well in the last preseason game from what I watched. So I thought maybe his stock was up a little bit, but I don't know. I definitely have a soft spot for him because I think he should have gone earlier in the first round. And I think he's a guy that's going to, rack up a lot of sacks once he gets going in the NFL.
Oh, I really hope so. But I think the reason I didn't include him is just because, I feel like he's shown, like Sydney Brown, I feel like has shown more positives than Nolan Smith. That's not knocking Nolan Smith down by any means. I just feel like it's been a bit more like he's had his rookie moments, if that makes sense. Like there was the one play in preseason where he just failed to set the edge, and then the first preseason game, and it led to a big run. So those kinds of things, I feel like I've caught on to more. Sort of nitpicky, is sort of he's going to learn that stuff. Obviously, he's gonna get better at that. But I just feel like Sydney Brown has been showing a bit more flash. But Nolan Smith has looked pretty good. And I also could have included Jalen Carter in that very first snap in preseason. Just a nice swim move past the guard and forcing incompletions.
That's very valid, and he's been vocal that he wants to try and be defensive rookie of the year this season. So yeah. And now that we're starting to talk about some of these other guys, let's just jump right in to the position previews, breakdowns, expectations for the rest of these position groups. We have to go through the linebackers, the interior defensive linemen, and then everybody on the offense. So we're going to crank it out. Obviously, we spread this out last year when we did it, but we're going to get it in this episode because we got some fun stuff planned for the next 2 weeks leading up to the season. So let's do this, and I'll start because you started last week. And let's start with the inside linebackers. For the Steelers, obviously the big signing in the offseason was Cole Holcomb, who they brought over from Washington. They also brought in Landon Roberts, and then during the preseason, during training camp, they brought in Quan Alexander, who has looked very good. He's a guy that I could have given some stock up to because he's looked good in these 2 preseason games, and I've heard he's even taken some first-team reps away from Landon Roberts a little bit. But the way that I've kind of heard it described is that it's Cole Holcomb has worn the green dot, I believe, in both. I know he definitely did in the first preseason game. I think he did in the second one as well. But from what I understand is in base sets, it's going to be Holcomb and Roberts. And when they're in the nickel, it's going to be Holcomb and Alexander. And then when they're in the dime, it's going to be just Holcomb. So it sounds like Holcomb's going to be that 3-down linebacker, and you're going to get Quan Alexander and Landon Roberts mixed in there. I really like Landon Roberts, and it's just downhill, thumper mentality. Yeah. It reminds me a lot of Lawrence Timmons when he was with the Steelers. Back in really, I guess that was more like the early 2010s. Yeah. So, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from him a little bit. And then they've also got Mark Robinson, who's, hasn't done anything super wild that flies off the page. But I think that he'll still make the 53-man roster. I don't know if he's going to dress necessarily, but he was starting games at the end of last year. So, that just kind of tells you what the Steelers thought of Miles Jack and Devin Bush towards the end of their time in Pittsburgh. but I expect him to make the roster and hopefully progress a little bit. And then I honestly think, and then I expect one of Tanner Muse or Nick Kwiatkowski to also make the roster. I think they're going to end up carrying 5 guys there, but that's kind of what the position group has to offer, and how I see it kind of breaking down.
How do you feel about this linebacking group compared to last year's?
I like it because this is what Omar Khan went out and built and said, hey, I like kind of the overhaul a little bit of going from the Miles Jack, the Devin Bush sideline to sideline to kind of more of these guys who are, going to be down in the box, taking care of business. And Holcomb has looked really good. He's looked the part of that free agent signing. I believe they signed him to a 3-year deal. So he's looked fantastic. And I'm actually really excited about how this whole thing has kind of come together. I will say the Quan Alexander signing, I think that's going to be a really beneficial move for this Pittsburgh team. And honestly, I've got some confidence. This is what I'm saying. Every single group that I had concerns about, they've all looked the part in preseason so far. So I'm optimistic about this inside linebacker unit.
Yeah. So, I mean, just thinking about it last year, it was more like sideline to sideline. And I'm looking at it now, it's just like these are more like hard-nosed guys, just like get down and like, just making the tackles, sure-handed tackles sort of vibe. But, I mean, me personally, I think I might say I like it more than last year, and I don't know if that's. I just feel like you said, like they've been showing. I mean, they've been playing pretty well in training camp and in preseason. So, and that Quan Alexander signing might be a sneaky good one eventually down the line. But
I think we could be sitting back here, middle of the season talking about, wow, like the presence that he has on this defense is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ask me on the spot, what was I more excited about? I mean, I was always a big Miles Jack fan from when he came out of college.
Yeah.
And, I have a Devin Bush jersey. I thought he was going to be I thought he was going to be, the next great Steelers inside linebacker when they drafted him. So, I really liked the group they put together last year. But, what we've seen from this one, I'm really, optimistic about it. So, I like where they're at. Let's talk about the Eagles inside linebackers now. And we touched it a little bit on Nakobe Dean, but why don't you talk about it? Because I know this is a position of probably the biggest position of concern on this Eagles defense right now.
Yeah, it's a pretty major concern. I mean, it's really Nakobe Dean right now. And then there's an undrafted free agent, Ben Semarin, who he actually looked pretty decent in the second preseason game. So he had, I believe, 6 tackles. But I mean, you just lost Miles Jack to retirement. You lost Sean Bradley to injury. Christian Ellis has shown some promise, but he's more of an outside linebacker. And I feel like maybe Zach Cunningham he probably should make the roster just for the purposes of having another body there. But again, it's I mean, Nakobe Dean's obviously going to be the one calling the plays. He's got the green dot in his helmet. But apart from him, I'm not really sure that the inside linebacker position is all that. Like Nicholas Moreau, I don't know if he's going to make the team. He's been playing pretty deep into preseason games too. So, and I did mention him as a stock down in the last episode because he just hasn't been standing out in a good way. So I feel like it's just a lot of. I'm feeling very pessimistic about that group. I think Nakobe Dean can be fine, but apart from him, I'm not really sure. I mean, before this retirement that Miles Jack announced, I thought it would have been Miles Jack and Nakobe Dean, and then that's what Eagles fans like on the there was a poll and a lot of Eagles fans. There was a good percentage of Eagles fans that thought it was going to be those two starting, but he's obviously gone. So.
Let me ask you this: who starts opposite Nakobe Dean week 1? I mean, we've got 1 week of preseason left. Training camp's over. Like what you've seen so far could very well be it. Like who's starting opposite Nakobe Dean?
Probably Zach Cunningham, just for the sake of experience. Because I really don't think you're going to start Ben Semarin. He's going to be more of a special teamer, I think.
Man, I think he's good enough to make it. I can't even believe that's where you're I get it, and I agree with you that it's going to be Cunningham, but man, you're low on Nicholas Moreau, dude. Like the fact that you're mentioning Van Sumeren over Moreau.
Because he stood out more. He just has been. He's just been playing better. And I know it's preseason still, but Moreau has done nothing to make the roster, nothing positive. It's been more negative than positive. I genuinely couldn't tell you a single positive thing that he's done in training camp or preseason. So
on the spot, what's your concern level 0 out of 10 with this position group? 10 being you're detrimentally scared of what the possibility could be here.
I mean, it's probably closer to a 10 than it is to a 5, honestly. I'm pretty concerned. Like, it's just because the Eagles have devalued that position so much. It's just there's no importance. Which is fine. That's fine. Not every position can be prioritized. It's just when you have, I would be less concerned if there was like another more experienced, sort of solid inside linebacker there, but there's just isn't. Like, Nakobe Dean is only in his second year, and he didn't even play defense all that much last year. I think he'll be fine, but for the sake of depth and just it's just not. It's very thin.
It's even more concerning when you talk about like Zach Cunningham is probably the guy that's starting opposite Nakobe Dean, and I don't even know if he knows the playbook yet. He's been here like 2 weeks.
Yeah, and exactly. So I don't know. Maybe they bring someone else in after roster cuts or something like that, but I don't know. It's looking very bleak in that position.
Yeah, it's a tough spot right now for sure. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on the inside linebackers, but definitely thin there, and definitely position group that's probably the one you got to keep the closest eye on going into these first couple weeks of the season.
Yeah, for sure. That's all I have on that front.
Sounds good. So let's move over to the edge rushers now on the defensive side of the ball. And it's interesting because the Steelers were actually, going into the season, it felt like they were a little thin here. But, with TJ Watt back healthy and obviously Alex Highsmith, you give him the long-term deal. Then they go out and sign Marcus Golden, which is, a veteran presence, a guy who's put up double-digit sacks in a season before, and also then go out and draft Nick Herbig. All of a sudden, this group got, very deep. And, for TJ Watt, I think I've talked with you off air before. I've got big expectations for him this season. I think he's going to be back in the conversation of, possibly defensive player of the year if he can stay healthy. I'm thinking that he's going to get up, above 15 sacks, maybe up around, 18, 20 sacks in that range. I'm expecting a big year from him. And I'm expecting Alex Highsmith to really take a jump. I mean, I know he had double-digit sacks last year, but even still, his best games were when TJ Watt was healthy. So if TJ Watt is healthy, I expect big things from Alex Highsmith again. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if we get another double-digit sack season out of him. So, I mean, I think we're really going to see this Pittsburgh defensive front return back to kind of what they were a few years ago. Just 2 years ago, where they're leading the league in sacks. And I think Marcus Golden's only going to add to that. Nick Herbig, his strength is getting to the quarterback. And I think that could potentially be all we see out of this group. I mean, they have Quincy Roche, who, is trying to make the roster. They have a couple undrafted free agents in David Perales and Toby Ndukwe. But I think that, when I'm just talking about those top four, I have high expectations for them this season. I think they're going to be a really stout group.
I mean, that's a pretty solid rotation. I mean, Marcus Golden, like you said, who's had double-digit sacks. I mean, TJ Watt, obviously the expectations are really high, as they should be, because he was, he's just so dominant. He's a game wrecker.
Yeah.
Alex
Former
Highsmith,
player of the year.
Exactly. Alex Highsmith got paid. I mean, he's only going to get better. How old is he? I think we talked about this last week.
I think he's 26.
He's only 26.
But I mean, and supposedly he's looked really good in training camp, and he's also developing. He's known for his inside spin move, and now supposedly he's been developing an outside spin move in training camp as well. So I mean, if he's coming at you and you don't know what way he's trying to go on a tackle, man, I mean, this guy could be really dangerous coming off opposite TJ Watt.
Yeah, good luck. I mean, and then Nick Herbig showing a lot of potential to take some snaps, a good amount of snaps. That's a pretty damn good group.
This is going to be the strongest. I fully believe this is going to be the strongest part of the Steelers defense this year. Their defense is going to be what it's going to be because of how prolifically they're going to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I will say I saw something where ESPN did not a ranking, but they kind of listed the the team that had the strongest position group at each position group, and they actually said Pittsburgh for edge rusher. And I was like, well, that's cool. But I was like, I wonder if they forgot what Philadelphia has in their edge rushers. So why don't you talk about it a little bit? Because, I mean, for as good as Pittsburgh's group is, to me, Philadelphia may have the best group of edge rushers in the entire National Football League.
I mean, they're pretty. I think it's closer than you might think, but maybe they definitely did snub the Eagles. I mean, 70 sacks last year. We're gonna pretend like that's nothing. Fine, whatever. Write us off. It's fine. We don't need it. Well, that's just more motivation for us. But edge rusher, I mean, the biggest one, obviously, Hassan Reddick, who actually underwent thumb surgery, but he should be fine for week 1. Not worried about that. That dude, I mean, he's gonna have a really good season too. He could be in contention for Defensive Player of the Year too.
Yeah, bro.
I think he got 2 votes.
He's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that dude's also a forced fumble machine. That dude just punches the ball out like it's nothing. Oh my God, I love watching him play. It's so much fun. Just the way he bends. He might be undersized. Who cares? He's faster than your offensive lineman. The way he bends, the way his spin move, and his dip and rip sort of. Oh my God, like it's just so fun to watch him. Like anytime I'm watching the defense out there, Hassan Reddick's the one dude I'm watching every time, every snap. But then you talk about our other guys. I mean, Brandon Graham listed there as well, and I mean, he also had double-digit sacks last year. I'm literally going to go through this roster and be like, yeah, this guy, Josh Sweat, also did, and he's only going to get better. I mean, Brandon Graham will probably be more of a rotational guy as he was last year, but still, for a rotational guy to get double-digit sacks is still kind of crazy to me, but that just shows you how good and how deep this edge rushing room is. Josh Sweat, as I said, I mean, he got paid last year, and he's only getting better at this point. And then
he's one of my favorite players in the NFL, just because I feel like he's so ridiculously underrated.
He is, yeah, and I mean, he probably still will be because people just I swear, if I ask people who if they know who he is, they probably say no, but
they honestly may not. And I mean, when you're on a team with guys who just get to the quarterback like Hassan Reddick, like, Brandon Graham, who's had the storied career in Philadelphia, like it's understandable that Josh Sweat gets lost in the shuffle a little bit, but he's just as good as those guys.
Yeah, exactly. So don't sleep on him either. And then Nolan Smith, who I mean is gonna play, obviously. He got banged up a little bit. I think it was a shoulder injury in that the second preseason game, but he should be fine. And I don't really expect him to play or at least take away snaps from Josh Sweat or Hassan Reddick, but I still think he's got potential to be Hassan Reddick type, just not this season, but he'll get there. He's just, I mean, it's very similar builds, but
very similar. I mean, it's the perfect guy to kind of be a rotational piece behind is Hassan
exactly.
Reddick.
Yeah.
Learn from him, grow behind him, and spare him some reps when you get in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And then Patrick Johnson, I feel like should make the roster. He's been making it the last couple seasons. He's more of a special teamer, but he's played on defense like every, I don't know, not too many snaps, but he has stepped in at times. And then Derek Barnett's probably going to make the roster. I hope he doesn't, but this dude's a penalty machine. He just loves to commit the dumbest penalty, like offsides, encroachment calls, all these dumb ones, all these avoidable ones.
And now he's coming off that major injury as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of a reduced role he maybe has compared to years past.
Yeah, and then the one other guy is Taron Jackson. I don't know if he'll make the roster, and if he does, it's probably going to be over Derek Barnett, but he's been with the team for the past 2 seasons too. So he's been on, I think he was on the practice squad last year. So not really, I don't have many expectations for him, but if he does make it, it'll be over Derek Barnett. But other than them two, it's a pretty good group of edge rushers. So
no, and I think the biggest thing you can say here is there's just depth for days at the edge rusher for the Eagles. So
yeah.
Definitely something that you like just to spare these guys. And then also if you have to deal with any injuries at any point throughout the season, you've got the guys that can step in and fill the shoes of some of those top edge rushers. So
exactly.
Definitely as good as they come position group wise. But we will move now to the guys on the inside of that defensive line. Starting with the Steelers, Cameron Hayward's the guy that obviously you're always going to turn to. You wonder when is you really going to kind of hit that wall of starting to deteriorate. I mean, drafted all the way back in 2011 and, still chugging along on the interior defensive line for the Steelers here. But, until he really starts showing some major decline, he's still going to be relied upon for the Steelers. Larry Ogunjobi, the Steelers signed back to that long-term deal. To be alongside Cam Hayward. And then the other guy who is actually another guy that could have been in the conversation for stock up is Keanu Benton, who's had a really good training camp, has really looked the part as an interior defensive lineman for the Steelers, specifically at the nose tackle position. I think he's even kind of jumped Montravius Adams for starting at that spot. And then the Steelers also have some other guys that are just good depth here. They've got DeMarvin Leal, who's a little bit of an athletic freak, can play, as an edge rusher or can play, inside at more of like the 2-3 tech. And then Isaiah Loudermilk has been with the team for a while. He'll get some run there too. Armand Watts is a guy that they brought in free agency. So Mike Tomlin's even said there's going to be some hard cuts when it comes to, making the 53-man roster when it comes to the interior of this defensive line. Because they've got a lot of players here, and I think it's pretty clear-cut who the starters are going to be. But just filling out the rest of the depth there's definitely going to be some tough decisions to be had.
Well, Keanu Benton will definitely be there. I don't know if you did say Braden Fehoko, right?
I didn't mention him. I was going to mention him after because he's a guy. There was a quote. I don't remember who said it. I don't know if it was Tomlin or if it was somebody else on the coaching staff, but they said if Braden Fehoko was on the Titanic, they probably the way that he plugs holes, they probably could have made it to shore. This dude just I'm so excited to see him like in game action, man, because the Steelers have struggled the past 2 seasons in stopping the run a little bit. That's been kind of their one Achilles heel on defense. I think this dude's going to be a big piece in kind of rejuvenating that
literally
that steel curtain that's going to stop the run. So he doesn't get to the passer. That's fine. This dude is going to just absolutely stop running backs in their tracks, and I'm excited to see him in action. So, he's another guy that I'm just really, really, have, lot. I don't want to say lofty expectations for, but he's going to have a big role on this team this season.
So, I'm curious, who do you think makes the team then? Would Montravius Adams make it, or do you think he gets cut?
Dude, it's a tough question, and I kind of want to save it for next week when we dive into predicting the 53-man roster. I think Fehoko is definitely on the roster, though. I will say that. When we talk about cuts, who's going to make it, who's not, I'll save that for next week. But that's what it comes down to. There's going to be some tough cuts here. I mean, Montravius Adams started last season. Montravius Adams started half of the season prior. Like, he's a good player, but it's just like how many guys are going to keep on the interior defensive line? DeMarvin Leal is a great young player. Isaiah Loudermilk has had arguably his best preseason to date. So it's like there's going to be tough decisions to be made. Armand Watts has had a really strong training camp. So, we'll dive into that next week. I've got some predictions on it. I'm going to save them for that episode, though.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So let's flip things over and talk about the Eagles' interior defensive line, a group that's also going through some change this season with obviously Javon Hargrave leaving in free agency.
Yeah. So, okay, Fletcher Cox, the experience. I mean, he's been with Philly for over a decade now. He's listed as one of the starters, and maybe Jalen Carter will take some of those snaps away from him at some point during the season. But for now, it's Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis listed as those defensive tackles as the starters. Jalen Carter and Milton Williams are listed as backups. Milton Williams I feel like he's also been kind of underrated. I mean, he's definitely been developing more as a pass rusher. He's solid against the run. And I feel like last year, I think he had 3.5 sacks last year or something like that. He's definitely a capable backup as well. And just another body to have in there. And I mean, I've always kind of liked him in the rotation. And this team has been known for having a lot of defensive tackles, a lot of rotation on the defensive front. So they also have Kentavious Reed, who they signed from the Saints. He's been fine in the preseason. And then Marlon, I can never pronounce his last name.
Is it Tuipulotu? I know Marlon. Yeah.
But Tuipulotu, I believe is how you say it, is the other one listed. Moro Ajomo are the 7th round rookie got injured. He actually had to go to the hospital because of, I believe he was a concussion. Thankfully, he's fine though. He's just going to be out at least for the next week or so, probably a little longer than that. So I want Moro Ojomo to make the team just because I like his story. I believe he's from. Well, I always forget I always confuse them. Moro Ojomo is from. I want to say where is he from? He went to Texas. And why can't I find it? But anyway, but I just really, I mean, he's shown promise so far. He's more of a run stuffer, sort of similar to Jordan Davis in build, but I wanted to make the team. He'd probably make it over Marlon, but again, predictions kind of saving for next week. But that's in terms of confidence with this group, it's definitely younger than it has been in recent years, and maybe not as experienced. Losing Javon Hargrave is obviously massive. I didn't mean that as a pun either, but yeah, it's I'm still okay with this group. Like I don't think they're gonna add anyone by any means. And I think relying on these younger guys to produce right away, I feel like with the potential that Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter have, I think it will play, especially Jalen Carter. I mean, I think it was Brandon Graham who said that he should have gotten like first overall over anyone. Or it was one of the veterans on the defensive line that said that. But that tells you how. Or Fletcher Cox has said that. That tells you how much he thinks of Jalen Carter. So
yeah. Well, the one question that I want to ask you here is Jordan Davis was also a first round pick of the Eagles just two drafts ago. I mean, what are your expectations for him? Because I feel like people aren't really talking about Jordan Davis at all. And I mean, it's like, I feel like even though Jalen Carter has looked good and you've still got Fletcher Cox and some of these other rotational guys, like Jordan Davis shouldn't just be off the hook. Like there should be an expectation for him to take a jump in year two. I mean, am I wrong in thinking that like there has to be some kind of a bigger expectation here?
Yeah, I know you're not wrong. Man, I'm trying to how do I quantify it? Because I don't think there's an exact number of sacks that I'm expecting to get. He's obviously still developing in that aspect.
He's more of a run stuffer, and that's what makes the combo with Jalen Carter so enticing, is because Carter does get to the quarterback. That's more of his skill set. So they complement each other well.
Yeah, my thing with him is I hope he stays healthy. And when he came back, he didn't quite look the same last season, but based off training camp, he's looked like back to that old form, or if not even better. So I guess, I don't really know how to put it into words.
There's no way to quantify it. I get that.
Yeah. But as long as he can stay on the field and, I mean, make plays, really I don't expect him to get too many sacks, at least right away, because he's still, as we said, he's more of a run stuffer. But I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be solid. Like maybe that's just me saying that because I don't know what to expect from him because he was injured last year. So I'm a bit unsure on that front, but I think he should be fine. And worst case scenario, I feel like Jalen Carter plays more than him, but I'm not sure. That's a tough question because I don't really know how to answer that.
Well, he's the guy that I'll definitely keep my eye on as we kind of watch these first couple weeks of the season to see, just what his snap count is compared to these other interior defensive linemen. And I guess it is just look good against the run. And, as long as there aren't any games where you're going up against a running back and he's going for 130 yards on you or something like that, generally he's going to be doing his job. But let's flip things over to the offense now. And let's stay in the trenches. We'll start with the offensive line. For the Steelers, it's a little bit retooled. We talked about Dan Moore is probably going to be the starting left tackle come week one. That's my general sense. I think he's going to start at least the first 2-3 weeks. And Broderick Jones is the rookie there. And we talked about him earlier, so I won't spend a ton of time on him, but I'm content with where he's at right now. And eventually I think he's going to overtake Dan Moore Jr. at that spot. But outside of that, they're returning, 3 other starters in Mason Cole, James Daniels, who's looked very good this training camp, I will say, and Chukwuma Okorafor. And then Isaac Seumalo was the big addition in free agency. And I think that that's going to form a really formidable interior offensive line. I think the Steelers are going to be able to run this ball at will this season, which is really how they want to play, base things off the run and then go to the play action. So I like what they have there. And then as far as depth, I mean, Broderick Jones is going to be, that kind of backup. I don't want to say it's swing tackle because I think he's more than that. But but he's going to be the backup tackle to start. Dan Moore Jr. is the one who can really swing from side to side.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, even Chukwuma Okorafor has experience playing left tackle, but he's kind of settled in at right tackle. And then, Nate Herbig is obviously going to make the roster. At this point, I think they're going to keep Kevin Dotson. I really haven't heard any murmurs about him potentially being traded, but you might as well keep him for the depth. And then maybe we see another guy like a Spencer Anderson, who's their versatile 7th round. I think they've given him snaps in the preseason at all 5 offensive line positions. So having someone who's versatile like that, I don't know if he's actually gotten a snap at center, but they've had him, at least, practice snapping the ball to Mason Rudolph. I don't know if he's actually had any team periods where he's played center, but uber versatile. They've got a couple other guys in LaRaven Clark and William Dunkel, Ryan McCullum, who are trying to make the roster spots, but more on the outside looking in. But, from where I was a year ago, how down I was on this offensive line, to how they closed out the season last year, to now the new additions in Herbig and Broderick Jones and Isaac Seumalo, who they've brought in. Like, I think that this offensive line is going to be really, I don't want to go out and say they're going to be really good, but like they are going to be a formidable offensive line. I don't have concerns about them, I guess I should say, which that was the opposite of how I felt last year.
Yeah, I remember that was like all the talk we had. There's just the concern you had, or like we had in the offensive line. I mean, it's like the total opposite now, which is like crazy to think about, like how much change a difference or how much change a year makes.
Props have to go to Pat Meyer on that, the offensive line coach, because it was his first season as the O-line coach last year. And I mean, what he's done to really kind of coach these guys up and kind of instill his technique. He expects his offensive linemen to play. I mean, it's been really evident on the field how the success that they've had, especially the end of last year. And I think going forward, he's got to get a lot of credit for how good this unit has performed.
For sure. And it's just continuity from last year and then adding play. I mean, that's the recipe for success and for building, I mean, any roster really. So that's pretty good additions to the offensive line.
Yeah. And I mean, the one player I don't think I mentioned was Kendrick Green, but again, we kind of talked about him earlier. I'm out on Kendrick Green. I really don't see him on the roster. I will tease that a little bit for next week's roster prediction episode. I don't see him making the roster. I know they've tried with him at fullback a little bit, but that's just putting lipstick on a pig, because if he ultimately can't play on the O-line, he's not making the roster. So, I think we're about to see the end of his time in Pittsburgh here shortly.
Yeah, that's it's just how it goes. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. But
talking about good offensive line coaching, we could talk about Jeff Stoutland and the Eagles and what he's done to really turn them. They're always one of the best groups in football. It seems like last year you could definitely make the case they were arguably the best offensive line, and here we are, and they returned 4 starters. So why don't you break it down for us? What are your expectations for that group?
I mean, to still be one of the very best, if not the best, in the entire league. Yeah, just straight up. Yeah, like I just think they're going to be that good. And obviously the big loss was Isaac Seumalo, who you guys have now, but I'm sure he's going to do well there. But we have Cam Jurgens listed as the right guard, the starting right guard at this moment in time. There was talk that the rookie Tyler Steen was going to start there, but it's not that he's been bad. Cam Jurgens has just been that good.
I'm so excited to see Cam Jurgens play, man. I mean, we talked about him last year when he was drafted. I mean, this is a dude that just seems like a dog, and now, he's going to be, possibly getting starting right guard reps.
Yeah, I'm just curious how that'll affect his. I mean, eventual. He's eventually. I mean, I would assume he's going to take over for Jason Kelce whenever he decides to hang the cleats up, but for now, I mean, I'm also pretty excited to see how he plays at right guard. And with one of the best offensive line coaches, I'm sure Cam Jurgens is going to be fine. And just considering how how fluid he is, and it's sort of similar to athleticism as Jason Kelsey. Like that's going to be fun. Them two right next to each other too. That's like, I mean, good luck trying to to shed blocks from them two, or like trying to get in their way, because those dudes are fast. They're athletic as hell. So those two will be fun to watch, at least in the interior. I mean, this entire offensive line really is going to be fun to watch. I mean, that starting offensive line is going to be set with Mailata, Dickerson, Kelsey, Jurgens, Lane Johnson. But backup wise, I feel like similar to last year, Sua Opeta's probably going to make the team. I mean, he's been the number 2 left guard. He's stepped in a few times last year at both guard positions. Tyler Steen, I mean, as I said, he's been good, just not as good as Cam Jurgens, but he's obviously going to be on the roster. Jack Driscoll, he's been there for a year, more of a versatile offensive lineman, could play at the guard position or a tackle. Although last year a tackle, I just remember the Saints game, he let up 2 sacks, I believe is against Cam Jordan, but it's just how it happened. But he'll be fine. Dennis Kelly, the one signing we made, I believe it was 2 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, maybe last month it was, but that's also a good addition to have. I mean, also pretty versatile, can play anywhere except for center. And he's been in the league for quite a few years, and the Eagles were the team that drafted him. So kind of a full circle thing, but I'm sure he's going to be there as the top. He probably will be the top swing tackle over Jack Driscoll. If not, it's going to be one of them too. But then there are some other guys, Roderick Johnson. I mean, I'm really not sure if these guys are going to make the roster, but Josh Sills, Cameron Tom, Tyrese Robinson, Fred Johnson, and Josh Andrews listed as another center, Julian Good-Jones. I'm not really sure they're going to make it, but you never know. Something could happen. Josh Jones definitely won't make it. That's the one little tease from me, I guess. But I'm feeling pretty good about this group. I mean,
I think one thing that's interesting that I just kind of like thought about here is like their entire interior offensive line is all guys who were centers originally. I mean, Dickerson was a center coming out of college.
Yeah.
I don't think that's bad to any respect. I think it's probably an easier transition going from center to guard than vice versa.
Yeah.
So just an interesting tidbit that I pulled away from there. But I mean, I don't have much to add. This unit is going to be really good as they have been the last couple of years.
Yeah, they're going to be pretty damn good. So good luck to any teams that are facing them, because they're one of the best. So
let's get into the skill positions now. Let's start with wide receiver, and I'm going to also group the tight ends in here too, just for the sake of time. But for the Steelers, the talk this preseason, it has to start with George Pickens, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked about his stock being up, dude. It's so exciting. Ryan Clark is out here on ESPN saying that he's, got more talent than Justin Jefferson, man. So, like, you just have to be so excited that the Steelers really may have like one of the, budding stars at the position on their roster. Allen Robinson has looked really good in the slot. Calvin Austin, man. I mean, I haven't even really talked about him. He's been fantastic. I think I gave him stock up in last week's episode. I can't remember for sure, but he's rattled off some huge games in the preseason so far. And that doesn't even include Deontay Johnson, who's kind of like, the old reliable on this team.
Yeah.
And he's going to come back, and I fully expect his touchdown. He didn't have a touchdown last year. So I guess when I talk about the stats a little bit with this group, I'm expecting a big season from George Pickens. I'm talking, up around, 1,000 to 1,200 yards. I expect him to get a couple TDs. He set the goal of 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. But I think with Deontay Johnson, his numbers coming back to the mean a little bit, regressing back to the mean, I expect him to get a couple touchdowns that maybe takes away from George Pickens. And obviously this team likes to run the football around the goal line. So, overall, I'm really excited about this wide receiver group. And then as far as the tight ends, man, Pat Freiermuth established a really good connection over the middle with Kenny Pickett last year. They still have Zach Gentry, who, is just a road grader when it comes to, blocking as a blocking tight end. And same thing with Darnell Washington, dude. He's expected to really get after it in the run game and around the goal line to be featured a lot. So, and then that doesn't even, mention Connor Hayward, who's also had a good training camp as well. So as far as the wide receiver and tight end groups go here, really strong for the Steelers. I'm really confident in what they have there.
Yeah, the four wide receivers that you mentioned, at least the top four. I mean, that's a pretty good group to have. Allen Robinson is your wide receiver 3. That's crazy to think
Dude,
about.
and people haven't been talking about him in the national spotlight. He has had a really good training camp with the Steelers. I mean, the Rams brought him in last year to be the number 2 to Cooper Kupp. The Steelers are brought him in really just to be like, hey, be a slot receiver, a weapon here and there. No big expectations for him at all. I think he's going to thrive in that role.
Yeah, I mean, this dude was a wide receiver 1 at one point in his career, and now he's asked to be in the slot. Like, man, that's a pretty good wide receiver trio right there. And then you have Calvin Austin, who you said. And then the tight end room, I mean, that's a pretty crowded room too. Zach Gentry there. Darnell Washington's an athletic freak. Yeah. Connor Hayward, they've been trying him out at fullback, which is interesting. But I think they did that last year too, right?
Yeah, and I mean, he has gotten some true like handoffs in preseason games as well. And I kind of expect him when the Steelers, want to use a fullback, that he's going to be the guy back there because they don't have another fullback under contract, I believe. So
right.
It's going to be him, and I'm honestly fine with that.
Unless you want Kendrick Green there at fullback, which you probably don't. But Pat Freiermuth is only going to get better with Kenny Pickett and just in general. So I mean, that's a pretty damn good receiving corpse.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I gave you the lofty expectations I have for Pickett. And I think Deontay Johnson is going to kind of replicate his yardage numbers and get a couple touchdowns in there as well. And Allen Robinson, I think he's a guy that like the way that he's been featured in the slot and down in the goal line, like low key, that may be a guy that will be sitting here like 4 weeks into the season and everybody's going to be trying to add him to their fantasy team just because he's going to have, kind of like he's going to just be utilized so much around the end zone. I'm kind of expecting a good season from him too. Again, there's not a lot that I can be down about with the Steelers team. So I'm really positive on the wide receivers. I'm curious if you feel the same about the Eagles group.
I mean, when you have 2 receivers who eclipse 1,000 yards in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith as wide receiver 1A, 1B, skinny Batman, small Batman, all these nicknames, like, yeah, of course I'm going to be high on this group. I mean, the expectation for them is I feel like going to be around the same, really. I mean, Devontae Smith's gets a lot of targets, and so does A.J. Brown, but man, it's just I love watching those two. They're so good together. I mean, Devontae is definitely more of a really crisp route runner, can get open because of his routes. And AJ Brown, I mean, you could just throw it up to him. This dude's gonna catch it. Not that Devontae Smith can't, but it's just so fun to watch AJ Brown go up for it and catching him on a quick slant. Good luck with that because that dude is sneaky fast. Like people underestimate that, but So those are the 2 receivers at least that are going to be starting. Wide receiver 1 and 1A and 1B. And yeah, like I said, statistically probably sort of similar, probably not as high. It kind of depends on wide receiver 3. And I mean, last year it was Quez Watkins. He underwhelmed. Didn't really. The only notable touchdown he had was against the Vikings in week 2. It was just blown coverage by the Vikings secondary. But other than that, he really was underwhelming. And so they brought in Olamide Zaccheaus from the Falcons or from the Falcons.
He was with the Falcons.
Falcons, yes. And he's looked good. I mean, he got injured in the second preseason game, but I hopefully he'll end up fine. But those two sort of battling it out. Quez Watkins has actually had a pretty good training camp. So I think we talked about that last episode. That's encouraging to see. And then wide receiver 5 and 6 potentially. I mean, Greg Ward, I feel like is stuck around forever. It's just, yeah. I mean, I think he'll probably make the team. Deion Kane's been around for a bit too. Joseph Ngata, Devin Allen, who, I mean, is more of a speed guy. Britton Covey, I actually haven't heard much about Britton Covey at all, really, other than kick return, punt return duties. But those 5th and 6th wide receiver positions will be interesting to watch. Wide receiver 3 should be 3 and 4. I think will be those two, Zaccheaus and Watkins. So I hope that whoever it is wide receiver 3, that they do better than what Quez did last year. So more of those slot guys. And I mean, Quez is all about speed. Zacchaeus I feel like, is probably better suited as the slot guy just because he's, I think, a better route runner than Quez Watkins is. So that'll be an interesting battle to watch. And then there's also Johnny King, Jaden Hasselwood. Um, Johnny King had a solid last 2 games, but again, I don't know if that'll be enough for him to make it on the roster. Hasselwood sort of similar outside looking in, but it's a pretty solid group.
It's a really solid group, and I think Zacchaeus kind of slots right into that. What you lost in Zach Pascal last year, so I don't think you're really going to skip a beat there. And if Quez Watkins struggles like he did last year, you have him to kind of rely and fall back on. So I expect this group again. I mean, stat wise, do you see AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, matching what they did last year? Either guy maybe performing higher or worse than what they did last year?
I mean, I think AJ Brown might get more targets, maybe not as much yardage, and maybe the touchdowns. I believe he had 10. That might come down a little. Devontae might get more in that aspect, but I think it's still going to be fairly similar as long as they can stay healthy, and same with Jalen Hurts. So, I mean, it's a scary duo. And then I guess sort of moving on to tight end Dallas Goedert, who is, I still feel like, is underrated. He's probably a top 5 tight end in the league, but I still remember when he got injured against Washington. It was a horse collar tackle, and the refs didn't call it. Oh God, that's the one game we lost early, or like that, to end our unbeaten run. But still one of the best yards after catch and just catching the ball. It's just the Super Bowl is a prime example of the catches he made. Man, they were just so clutch. And then there's Grant Calcaterra. I mean, it's kind of similar to last year. Jack Stoll is also there.
I remember having the same conversation last year.
Yeah. So that really hasn't changed much. I mean, they brought in Dan Arnold. He's been fairly quiet. Tyree Jackson, kind of similar. Brady Russell, he's also been quiet. Like the three. I mean, Jack Stoll, as we even talked about last year, more of a blocking tight end. Calcaterra is more of the athletic guy, more of the guy who's gonna. More of a yak person, yak player. So I mean. I think production-wise, as long as Dallas Goedert can be healthy, I think he can get somewhere between 6 to 8 touchdowns. Definitely more yards than he had last year. So, I mean, that's the other reason that AJ Brown, Devontae Smith's production might go down a bit, because Dallas Goedert was injured last year. So, but it's still a pretty good receiving corps too. I feel like it's pretty even with the Steelers, honestly.
Yeah, both are very solid receiving cores, no doubt, and going to be key parts of this offense for both teams. And a key part of the Steelers' offense, especially down the stretch last year, was Najee Harris and running the football, and that's going to be a big part of this year too. I mean, I talked a lot about Jaylen Warren. His stock is up for me in the Steelers right now, and I think he's going to have a bigger role in this offense. But let's not jump the gun on Najee Harris quite yet. And I mean, hey, the biggest thing is if he's healthy to start the season, that's going to be key. The way that he closed out last year, multiple games rushing for over 100 yards. The Steelers were really running the ball at will against other teams. So if they can get back to that, and they really have this 1-2 punch dynamic, I think that's really how they're going to want to win a lot of their football games. For Najee Harris, let me actually pull up what he closed the season with stat-wise last year, because I know he started out the season slow. But the way that he kind of came on strong at the end of the year, he was still able to get over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns on the season. So expectation-wise, I really do feel like there's going to be more of a split with Jaylen Warren this year. So I think he's going to be somewhere in like the 800 to 1,000-yard realm. But I think he's still going to get touches around the goal line. And if the Steelers are really utilizing running backs down in that area, he could get up to double-digit touchdowns. So outside of those two guys, I mean, I could see Anthony McFarland making the roster. There's really no other running back that stood out, so it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do. And I'll touch more on that again next week when we get into predicting the 53-man roster. But Connor Hayward's gotten snaps as a running back. He's such an uber versatile player that whether you want to line him up at fullback, in emergency situations at running back or in tight end, which is kind of where he's used to. He could get some snaps at running back, and I would be comfortable with that. So again, another group that they're going to be key to what this offense wants to do.
Yeah, you got that 1-2 punch with Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. I mean, that's a pretty good duo to have, and McFarland as that third spot. I mean, he stepped in fairly well last year when Najee was kind of banged up, but yeah, that's a pretty good group.
Yeah, it's a solid group. There's nothing to complain about, and I feel like you kind of know what you're going into with. Whereas the Eagles now, and obviously losing Miles Sanders last year, they bring in Swift from Detroit, which you actually predicted was going to happen. And then they also bring in Rashad Penny in free agency, return some of these other guys. So what are kind of your expectations for this running back room for the Eagles?
Well, I will say this. I don't expect any of them to make or to crack the 1,000-yard mark because I think it really is going to be a committee. Although I feel like DeAndre Swift will be the lead back. It's just a matter of if he can stay healthy or not. But it's just, man, Kenny Gainwell's still there. Boston Scott's still there. Got another 2 years. He got extended for another 2 years. Trey Sermon has shown, he had that 33-yard touchdown against the Browns. So he's shown some good flashes, some good potential, but it's going to be really hard to figure out who gets cut. And I won't say who yet.
I was going to ask you, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be an interesting point to talk about next week of how do you divvy it up? I mean, you've got, 5-6 running backs that you could make a case deserve a spot on this roster. And, the Eagles are only going to stick with 3 and,
four,
potentially
maybe
4.
max,
It may have to be 4 at most. Yeah.
And then one of those 4, if they do keep 4, will be a healthy scratch on game day, which was kind of Trey Sermon last year. So, man, expectation-wise, I mean, if Kenny Gainwell can build off his postseason run, then he might even overtake DeAndre Swift as that lead back. But Swift, Gainwell are both good. I mean, catching the ball in the backfield, I feel like we're more sure-handed in terms of that. Pass catching backs. I mean, Miles Sanders really wasn't all that good.
I was going to say that was something you lacked with Sanders last year.
Pretty one-dimensional, just more of a runner than he was a catcher. So I think, man, expectation-wise, I don't think any of them will crack the 1,000-yard mark. Maybe it'll be DeAndre Swift who gets the most touchdowns. I feel like that would make sense, even if he's not the lead back. I feel like he's more of that. He can be a goal line guy, but it's going to be something to watch the entire season because 1 week it could be DeAndre Swift, the next it could be Kenny Gainwell, the next or against the Giants it'll be Boston Scott. But that'll be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I mean Rashad Penny's, nothing to kind of bat your eyes.
I didn't even mention him. Yeah, wow. Oh my god.
I mean, that's a guy who's when he's healthy, he's looked really good at points in his career, and I thought that there was a chance he was going to be the lead back before they brought in DeAndre Swift, and now there's another guy that's going to be vying for reps and could also at the end of the season be the one leading this team in rushing yards. It's possible. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I meant to touch on Rashad Penny. I just totally left him out for some reason, but he's been showing more burst than DeAndre Swift has, which is a good thing, I guess.
I was going to say, I don't have any numbers to back this up. He looked like he had some juice to really put out there in the in the second preseason game. It just stood out for me just watching the game. Not that I have really any numbers at all in front of me to support that.
Yeah, no, I don't really either. Just because it's preseason. I don't take that too much into account at the moment, especially with just how crowded the running back room is. It's so tough to evaluate how this is going to shake out. But
we will have to see how it shakes out. But for both of these teams, something that's a certainty is who's going to be the starting quarterback. And starting for the Steelers, that's going to be Kenny Pickett. I think this guy's the future of the franchise. I think what we saw from him last year and his clutch ability in those couple of game-winning drives that he had, that's something that you look for in a franchise quarterback. And I think he's more than just a game manager. And I think that we're going to kind of see him take that jump to the next level this season. Last year in his 13 games, he had a 63% completion percentage, 2,400 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I think we're going to see all of these numbers go up, frankly. I mean, the completion percentage, maybe it's going to stay about the same, but I'm expecting him to be, above 3,000, ideally above 3,500 passing yards. I think he's going to definitely get double-digit touchdowns, and I'm hoping he's above, 15. I kind of hope he doubles his numbers from last year. And as far as the interceptions, he had 9. I'm okay with a guy that throws a decent amount of interceptions because it means he's also taking more shots down the field, which the Steelers offense is going to want to do. So, as long as his TD to interception ratio is good, I'll take the interceptions if it's coming with more passing touchdowns, which I think we're going to get. I mean, I already said I expect George Pickens to get 5 touchdowns, potentially. Deontay Johnson's numbers are going to return to the mean. He's, him potentially being around 3, 4, 5. I think Allen Robinson is going to get, potentially even more than Deontay Johnson. And then you got to factor in some for Pat Freiermuth, some out of the backfield. So if everything goes well, we could be talking about a guy that throws 20 touchdowns on the season. At the very least, I'm hoping he gets up around 15. But I'm high on Kenny Pickett. I'm not going to say he's going to take that jump into being a superstar, but, I don't think there's an ideal world for me is that he doesn't leave any doubt at the end of the season that he's the franchise quarterback for this Pittsburgh Steelers team moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, dude came up clutch in a couple of games late last season. And as I said before, I mean, this dude's been on fire.
Ricardo, let's say this again, bro. This guy, rookie year in Baltimore, need the game to keep your playoff hopes alive. Hostile environment, under 2 minutes left to lead a game-winning drive. And he does it, man. And he throws the game-winning touchdown to Najee Harris. He's just setting the stone to be, a Pittsburgh Steeler for a long time. And you saw the flashes last year. You saw the clutch gene. He's got the tools to put it together. Don't leave any doubt this season. Even if the stats don't jump off the page, ascend into being that franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and you've got the second year in Matt Canada's offense. It's not like he's learning a totally different one. He's gonna be more confident with his playbook, and it's already shown. As I said, he's literally been on fire in training camp and preseason. So
he's only got 2 incompletions in the 2 preseason games so far.
Yeah, so I mean, I think he could definitely get to 20 touchdown passes. I think he can. I wonder what the line is on that. We're not a gambling site, but still, I think he'll get the over on that, whatever that line is. If it's 15, I would go over. But pretty lofty expectation for him. I would say, at least, sorry, not lofty. I feel like realistic expectations from you at least, and I guess from me too.
Yeah, I think it's realistic. I mean, nothing, crazy outlandish. But I was trying to find his prop real quick, and I guess we can. If you want to close out with Jalen Hurts, I'll find that real quick while you start breaking it down for us. But obviously, a guy that I'll let you take it from me.
I mean, this dude played the game of his life in the Super Bowl. That's and then they still lost because the defense sucked. Jonathan Gannon, I blame him for that. But anyway, Jalen Hurts, God, I love it. This man got paid. This man, I don't know if I even brought this up. I might have brought it up last week where he has a picture of him walking out with all the confetti and the Chiefs.
I was going to bring that up to you. Yeah, keep going.
When I saw that, I was like, this is the guy I want. This is the guy I want to support. That's, to me, and to him, obviously, it's motivation. It's that chip on his shoulder, just this dude's never satisfied, is my point. And oh my God, seriously, this dude was so, his leadership qualities, there's nothing you can't dislike about him. It's such a, you have to respect the hell out of him, the way he goes about his game, the way he goes about just anything, really. He's just a class act. And when we talk about stats last year, I mean, 22 touchdowns passing at least, and then he had 15 rushing, and that's not even including playoffs. So only 6 interceptions, which is good. I hope he keeps that number pretty low, at least in that range. Passing touchdown wise, I think he can go up with that. I hope that the rushing touchdowns comes down a little bit, just because I don't want him to take as many hits as he did last year. And I mean, if it's at the goal line, so be it. You're not stopping him there on a QB sneak. But and he had 3,700 and he didn't even play like the full season. He missed 2 games, but I definitely think he could reach the 4,000-yard mark. He's still developing, and I don't care if he has a new offensive coordinator in Brian Johnson. He's known him since he was 5 years old. So I'm really not worried about that aspect of, the offensive side of the ball. He's just, man, this dude elevates everyone's game. Like he motivates everyone. It's just the energy, the vibe that this guy brings to a locker room is something you want in a leader.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Ricardo, I will say real quick, I just looked up and my battery is literally at 1% on my laptop. So if I die, I'm glad we were able to get everything in.
All right.
Kenny Pickett's over-under for passing touchdowns on the year, over-under 17.5. So, I mean, for me, that's a little bit risky.
A little bit, yeah.
Jalen Hurts over-under 21.5.
I'm taking the over.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's lower than I expected it to be.
It is. Yeah.
The only thing I'll say about Jalen Hurts, man, on another radio show that I do, sporadically here and there, filling in for another host, I ranked my top 7 quarterbacks going into this season. And I think that there's a clear tier 1 of Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Jalen Hurts. They're all those tier 1 quarterbacks, in my opinion. I had Jalen Hurts as number 3, the 3rd best quarterback in the league. I think he's incredible. He's exactly the type of guy you want. And the chip that he plays with on his shoulder, this is a dude that's just never going to not put in the work, never try and find ways to get better. He's everything that you want, and you sum that up, and he's going to continue to be that for this Eagles team. So, as we kind of run out of time here and I run out of battery life, anything you want to say before we wrap it up for good here?
Nah, man, almost there. We're almost there.
We are getting close, man, and I think that'll just about do it for this episode. Next week, dude, I'm excited for this one. I think we did a reaction to the 53-man roster last year. Yeah. This year, I'm really excited to predict it. So we're going to try and do that, predict the 53 on next week's episode. So tune in for that. It'll be a fun one. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you guys next time. Peace out, everybody.